Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode, the Super Bowl ending episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. My name is Josh Norris. His name, Ian Hartitz. Ian, buddy, good to talk to you.
Good to be back, Josh.
I know.
Good to be back.
And it's about a great game. I mean, last night's game was unbelievable. Obviously, as you all know, the Chiefs won 31-20. The story is just Patrick Mahomes. I mean, this was a 20-10 lead that the 49ers had. But what I will always take from these memorable spotlight games that are as big as the Super Bowl are individual performances. And there's no doubt in my mind for the next 5, 10, 15 years, this one will be remembered by Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs offense scoring 21 straight points and overcoming a 10-point deficit.
I know Damian Williams was awesome, and a lot of people think maybe he should have gotten MVP for the game, which I don't know, because the biggest thing in this game was how were the Chiefs going to respond to a 49ers defense that had the league's best pass rush and somehow did that by only rushing 4 guys on just an overwhelming amount of their plays. I mean, you could not ask a quarterback to have a tougher just game period. That's why, even though Mahomes wasn't great until the fourth quarter, I don't even want to say he was bad. The 49ers defense is that good, and we've seen them be that good all season long. So, yeah, it took until the fourth quarter for them to finally break, but 31 points against the 49ers, they absolutely deserve to win that Super Bowl.
It might have been the worst performance we've seen, though, from Mahomes through 3 quarters this season.
I don't know if it was his worst, though.
I don't.
Yeah.
Worst has this connotation of it's bad.
Yeah.
But obviously, everything in comparison to what Patrick Mahomes brings to the table, it's difficult to say any of it is overall bad because we see bad performances across the league. They just couldn't get anything going. And so much of that is because of this 49ers defense that we talk so much about all season long, especially those first 6 weeks of the season, just how much pressure they're able to generate. And they were able to not dominate, but play just fantastic football for 3 quarters, yet in the final 8 minutes, offensive football just took over, and Patrick Mahomes and the team scores 21 points.
I mean, look, their entire defensive philosophy is just based on those 4 guys getting pressure. That lets Richard Sherman sit at. Why do you never see wide receivers running past these slower cornerbacks? Because the quarterbacks don't have time to throw the ball downfield. There's no time for them to, Tyreek got loose once on that 3rd and 15, but other than that, the amount of times where Mahomes could actually sit in the pocket and look downfield, next to none. So it was the worst he's looked, but I don't want that to be mistaken with he was playing bad because the 49ers defense is just so good.
And it really caps an incredible playoff run by this Chiefs offense and Mahomes. I mean, he didn't have to come back from a 23-point deficit or a 28-point deficit or whatever he had to face off against the Houston Texans. They are obviously down against the Tennessee Titans as well. In fact, this comes from Alex Miglio. Patrick Mahomes came back from a collective 44-point deficit in 3 postseason games to win by a combined 42 points. I mean, that's in the last 3 games. We talk so much, and we talked about so much this Super Bowl week, of how the league is driven by offense. And when you have a Hall of Fame play caller attached to a Hall of Fame quarterback, I think we can already say this, who through 3 seasons and 2 seasons as a starter has an MVP award and now our Super Bowl, it's this perfect combination of chemical effectiveness and success. And just seeing that always gives them the potential to have these massive quarters. And in the biggest spot of the season, they had one of those massive quarters.
And it's also another example of just how much of a cheat code it is in the modern NFL to have an elite quarterback on a rookie contract. Sammy Watkins should not be on this team, price-wise. He's the top 5 highest-paid wide receiver in the entire league. And, we joked plenty of times about Sammy in weeks 2 through 17 of the regular season. The guy, divisional round, 2 catches, 76 yards. AFC Championship, 7 catches, 114 yards and a touchdown. Last night, 5 catches, 98 yards. Took it to Richard Sherman, who a lot of people were calling the very best cornerback in the entire league this season. So obviously I know the offense goes through Mahomes. It all starts and stops there. But just having guys like Sammy, being able to use a 2nd-round pick on Mecole Hardman, having the fastest player in the league. I mean, there's just Mahomes is so good that he can create off script, but having Andy Reid's play calls and having some of the talents they do on this offense, it's what made them Super Bowl champions.
Let's take it from the top. I even found it fascinating that prior to the coin toss or during the coin toss, Bill Vinovich forced the 49ers to say, yes, we want the ball. We almost had a Dak Prescott moment here.
Well, do you notice he was messing it up too? Kicker. What is the kicker doing at the coin toss?
I think it was Colquitt being I don't know, which was just an amazing moment to start off.
Was.
I do think in many ways the first half showed that this 49ers team, from a personnel standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, is, if not the best in the league, the second best in the league. Yeah. And it showed you that with 2 weeks to prepare, we saw so many intriguing plays, combination, series from both play callers, and specifically the 49ers, where so much of the week was discussed of how imperative the running game is to them. And, I thought it might be Raheem Mostert. Tevin Coleman actually got the start and really didn't play the rest of the game following that first or second quarter. Yet the most effective person running the football was Deebo Samuel on these outside edge runs. And so rather than relying on screens or short passes to get him out in space, Kyle Shanahan had 2 weeks to write plays on piece of paper and did that magnificently early in this game.
Yeah, the first 2 drives, Deebo had I know his runs were magnificent, but they actually dialed up a pass for him that he ended up tucking and just taking off. And this is what we talked about. They only had to throw 27 passes in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. So you knew Shanahan was sitting on a boatload of, trick plays he schemed up over the last few weeks, and it was fun to see those. But on the Chiefs side of the ball, I thought it was just as impressive. First play of the game, they ran that option. That it was something they went back to 4 or 5 times throughout the game. They got the touchdown from 1 yard out on a lead option, 4th and 1. The second quarter, they converted again on an option. Travis Kelce, direct snap, read option on a 3rd and 1 to get it. I don't know how many plays Andy Reid and Eric
Armstead.
Eric
Bieniemy.
Bieniemy, yeah. I'm not sure how many 2-point conversion type plays they had going into this game, but it seems like it was north of 10, which is just wild.
You think about that one play where basically 3 or 4 players in the backfield do a pirouette.
Yes.
Bieniemy talked about how that was brought from one of the first games played at the Rose Bowl, I believe.
1948 Michigan USC Rose Bowl.
And he just brought it up like, sure, everyone's seen that game. I didn't even know, we could watch those games. 1948 and drawing up a play that then is effective and works with everyone down blocking and creating this massive cave in the middle of the offensive line that a player can just run through was incredible. A crucial moment, though. I don't just want to fast forward through the first 2 quarters, but in the final about 2.5 minutes, minute and a half, where rather than taking a timeout to preserve about a minute and 50 seconds left on the clock, Kyle Shanahan elects to allow the Chiefs to run down the ball, run down the clock, and take the ball with about 50 seconds left, and then until the Chiefs call a timeout, doesn't even try to throw the football down the field. So he just wastes a complete 2-minute drive opportunity when the score was 10-10 at halftime.
Yeah, I know everyone's kind of at Shanahan right now, but for how he kind of handled that lead in the second half. But to me, the 2 most inexcusable coaching moves were that, which we're talking about, and then also when they kicked the field goal on 4th and 2 in the 3rd quarter. But sticking here before halftime, they were punting with 1:48 remaining.
Yeah.
The Chiefs were after Damian Williams got stuffed. 3 timeouts left. 49ers got the ball with 58 seconds after that. So they lost, like you said, literally almost an entire minute. They went ahead, they did 2 runs, got Chiefs timeouts, and then hit that big pass to Jeff Wilson. Thought they can get Kittle, but no points before end of half. They're just playing scared. And, when you have Garoppolo versus Mahomes, maybe that is the smart way to go about these things. Take your points when you can get them. But generally, I think most analytics would agree that, you need to be going for these, especially in the freaking Super Bowl.
Obviously, Kyle Shanahan was asked about that moment after the game. He said he was comfortable with the 10-10 tie at halftime. Do you think that it tells us what he believes in his offense and in his quarterback in that scenario? Because I do.
It's tough because on the one hand, he's not trying to put up points for halftime. On the other hand, he's comfortable enough with Jimmy G to not try to just run the ball against stacked boxes the entire time in the 4th quarter. The easy thing for him to do would have been to call 3 straight runs the entire 4th quarter. They probably would have gone nowhere because the Chiefs were completely selling out to stop the run at this point. Instead, he tried to put the game in Jimmy G's hands, but it wasn't consistent throughout the game. So it's a good question.
And I can't read his mind, obviously, but in a spot where also Kyle Shanahan, and I think he kind of received unfair criticism in that 28-3 meltdown when he was offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons against the New England Patriots.
The thing about that real quick, I thought Mike Lombardi had an awesome point about that. When he was offensive coordinator, when you're an offensive coordinator, it's your job to score points. It's the head coach's job to tell you when it's time to preserve clock. Yeah. Shanahan kept trying to score points in that game, but this one's a little bit different.
And this one, he did not in that moment. And sure, they were getting the ball in the second half, but it was very telling to me that John Lynch, the GM, was up in the booth screaming timeout in that scenario, and they just weren't calling it. They were very content just to ride it out at 10-10 going into halftime. But then they come out.
The Chiefs weren't.
No,
they were
weren't.
calling timeouts trying to get the ball back.
But it's also notable that once we get into the third quarter, the 49ers are the team that score 10 points. Yeah. They're the ones that then go up 20-10. There were long stretches of this game where Jimmy Garoppolo was able to hit his back foot and deliver the football or hold on to it and not be moved around. Not being moved around off your spot for 10 to 20 play stretches is kind of a cheat code offensively. And because of that, Jimmy made some really nice throws. And we've seen this, through the 17 games this season, the 18 games this season, where he has great placement. He has a quick trigger. He has receivers that can get open down the field. And he can hit those bucket throws in those moments. But then you look at it, and when it mattered most, when we reached the fourth quarter, when the play action was not available because the Chiefs were up on the clock and up on the scoreboard, does he have that inside him to lift the offense? And not everyone's going to be Patrick Mahomes, right? The easy thing to do is just to say, well, one quarterback did it and one quarterback did it and one didn't. Well, sure, you can say that, and I am, but Jimmy just doesn't, and this is the questions we had it all season long. I don't know if Jimmy has it in him to, in those moments, elevate outside of structure, off script. And it's a perfect team in terms of talent and in terms of coaching. But in the moment where it mattered most, it just didn't happen.
I would point out, I think they could increase the skill position talent around him a little bit. I mean, Mostert, incredible playoff run, man. Still an undrafted, free agent. They've had McKinnon on the IR all year. Coleman banged up, Breida banged up. George Kittle, they use him to block, I think maybe more than they potentially should. But when he's there blocking, okay, now Deebo Samuel, who we love. Deebo's awesome, but maybe not the most polished route runner at this point. They had to trade for Emmanuel Sanders halfway through the year. I agree with you. Jimmy G is not going to be this guy who consistently elevates his teammates. But if that's the case, well, let's try to elevate the talent level of the teammates at the very least to try to fix things moving forward. Because, look, at the same time, they were up 20-10 in the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. If Mahomes doesn't complete that 3rd and 15, maybe we're not even having this conversation.
But you play a winnable game for 3 quarters. That's exactly how they wanted to play the game for 3 quarters. Yet you just have a superhero on the other side. Yeah. And a player that, and we talked about this exactly leading up into the game. They have the potential in 8 minutes to score 21 points. And they did. The biggest difference, though, is just against pressure. It's against disruption. It's what your quarterback can do when everyone else lets him down on the field. And Jimmy was 1 for 9 for 20 yards and 2 picks when pressured this game and didn't complete a ball over 20 yards in the air. Meanwhile, Patrick Mahomes doubled his average yards per target in those moments, average yards per attempt when pressured in this game.
And it's a 1-game sample size, but again, we've been seeing this all season. And, the Pro Football Focus, both these guys during the regular season were top 5 quarterbacks in terms of fewest pressures per dropback. Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan, great job keeping their quarterbacks upright for most of the season. The difference was their QB rating under pressure. Mahomes was still a top 5 quarterback. Garoppolo, 16th. So, again, he is a above-average quarterback. I think we can all agree on that. But, if you're an above-average quarterback facing Patrick freaking Mahomes, good luck.
And the storyline that so many of us carry through this playoffs is just how much the mobility of Patrick Mahomes adds on to this offense. And once Tom Brady and Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers and those types move on, it would be shocking to me if we ever see quarterback prospects valued super highly that aren't mobile, because it's just an added dimension that they bring in these moments. And sure, it ended in an interception, but in a 2nd and 19, Patrick Mahomes making a defender miss at the line of scrimmage, then scrambling for 12 or 15 yards. There were plenty of other times where he was able to buy himself some time drifting away from the line of scrimmage. I'm not saying you have to look for a Patrick Mahomes type player, but just what he brings mobility-wise after 3 months ago dislocating his kneecap was an added element this entire postseason.
And we saw them, with the season on the line, really lean on him as part of the run game, not just, his kind of scrambling ability, which we all know is so great. But again, going back to all those option looks, that was just so huge for them because, when you do let the quarterback be a runner, the defense needs to account for that. Now, all of a sudden, you're playing 11-on-11 football. Every time the 49ers snap the ball and they want to run it, it's 10-on-11 because, we know Jimmy G isn't going anywhere. Only it was Joe Flacco and one other statue quarterback whose name escapes me. Those are the only guys worse than Jimmy G at scrambling this season. He is a 0 as a runner, and you don't need to be Kyler Murray. You don't need to be a Lamar Jackson. You don't really need to be Patrick Mahomes, but you got to give
Josh Allen.
You got to give us something.
Something,
though, just anything.
There were plenty of other players that had major days and major impacts on this game. First, I want to talk about the 49ers. Nick Bosa played an unbelievable football game. DeForest Buckner, an unbelievable football game, where I think Nick Bosa was credited with 10 pressures.
I saw that. Unbelievable.
I mean, and tears after the game because...
I'm like 38 snaps, like something ridiculous.
Wild. And that's exactly, like, if you could tell a 49ers fan heading to this game, you're leading for 3 quarters, Nick Bosa's getting to the quarterback, forcing him off a spot over and over again, that's the recipe for success. Yeah. But on the other side, I mean, and we talked about this all year long too, Ian, on these Sunday night wrap-up shows on the midweek podcasts, where the Chiefs looked in the mirror this offseason. And last year, they basically defensively just had Dee Ford and Chris Jones, and that's it. So this offseason, they say to themselves, okay, we're going to make Tyrann Mathieu a priority free agent. We're going to deal away Dee Ford and go get Frank Clark. Chris Jones took his game to another level this offseason. For much of the year, Juan Thornhill was a great player. Kendall Fuller had an awesome performance on Sunday night as well. Those players, sure, they weren't as dominant for 3 quarters, right? But when a team is trying to chase the Chiefs offense, again, a moment that we talk about all year, they have players, they have those playmakers in those moments that can make big moments. Yeah. And Chris Jones did that with batted balls on 3rd down, on 2nd down, that probably were open receivers, yet they were completely nullified just by the awareness of a pass rusher.
Yeah, but Rashad Breeland was awesome as well. Just
him too.
Throw him in there. And what's wild, they did make all those improvements on defense, and they were an offsides penalty last year away from potentially, we're talking about back-to-back Super Bowl champions right now. I mean, when the offense is that good, they're going to be able to compete in any single game. Like, the Super Bowl window is however long they have Mahomes. They're always going to be in a game. The guy has never lost an NFL game by more than 1 score. Like, you just do not see teams keep leads against this team if they can even build one to begin with. So, couldn't agree more. They have playmakers on the defense. Honey Badger was fantastic all year, especially in the playoffs. Fun team.
This comes from Jerry Sullivan. The Chiefs have lost 8 games with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, including last year's AFC title game. In 7 of those, the opposition had to score at least 29 points. Certainly did not do that last night. Only, 20 points from the 49ers as well. Let's look at the big picture with both these teams real quick. Let's look at the 49ers because, again, and I'll keep saying it, I think this was an ideal game for them for so long, for 3 quarters of it. And I don't understand doubting of anything other than that end of 2nd quarter, I'm not going to call it a meltdown, but decision that Kyle Shanahan had. But Kyle Shanahan's a fantastic coach. You can tell that he changes what this team wants to do each and every week. He adds on to it as the season goes along. You also have defensive talent. Yet where does this team stand? Because we know that it's nearly impossible to repeat top 3 defensive performances year over year over year. You can throw out Jacksonville from a few years ago. You can throw out the Chicago Bears from last season. The window certainly is not over. In fact, this window might have been 1 year ahead when really the 2020 season might be the best one for the 49ers coming up. Where does this leave the 49ers to you?
So I know the defense, they might not finish next year number 1 again, but at the same time, you could not ask for a better core in that defensive line to continue to build around. I do think they have talent at all 3 levels. I could see it being like the Bears. Were the Bears this year as great as they were in 2018 on defense? No. They had some more injuries, different things happened, but they were still awesome. And I think at the very least, we can put these guys in as having a top 5 to 10 defense. I've been going through some of the team needs over the last week, and my top 3 for San Francisco moving forward were the offensive line, cornerback, and wide receiver. I don't think their offensive line's bad, but when Jimmy G's your quarterback, and we just talked about all the problems with pressure, you need to make sure that your number 1 priority is protecting him. What was Jared Goff's downfall? That was the other quarterback that couldn't move around, Jared Goff. But when they lost their offensive line, Goff just couldn't do anything. You could see it happening with Garoppolo. Cornerback, look, Sherman, great season. I'm not going to put the guy down for 1 game, but with that, again, it all comes from the pass rush. If you could actually put some talent in the secondary to complement that, could definitely help. And then, wide receiver, get some more weapons. Obviously, they didn't feel good about the position entering this year. That's why they drafted all the guys. I mean, I know they had injuries throughout, but Dante Pettis isn't the one they thought they were. If George Kittle is your alpha number 1 pass game option, that's fine. Debo's great, but we need more. Emmanuel Sanders is going to be a free agent. Need more.
You know, I've put down and questioned Jimmy at times this season. I did it earlier in this podcast as well. But with that said, I truly believe you can win a Super Bowl with him. Sure. You just have to have so many things go correctly in a game, close to a perfect game. On the same side of that, I do wonder, and this might not be fair, and tell me if this isn't fair, if this is kind of the Chiefs' version of when they had Alex Smith. And the Chiefs were a very good team when they had Alex Smith, but they had a ceiling to them, right? They had a ceiling to them because they didn't have a quarterback that could create on his own, elevate everyone around him. So they moved up quite a bit, I believe, from 26 to the number 10 overall pick to go get a player who Brett Veach believed was the best quarterback prospect he has ever seen, and it's turned out to be correct. Now, there's not a Patrick Mahomes every year. There's not one every 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. But would it be a disservice to this roster, to this franchise, to not try to improve at the quarterback position, to find someone that we talk about that mobility, to find someone that can elevate everyone around him? Or, like I just said, should they be content with a quarterback that's probably in that, in any given week, the 10 to 17 window, and believe you can build a team and perfect enough around him that they can win a Super Bowl?
I haven't poured over Jimmy G's contract or anything, but my impression is that they can actually release him in these upcoming years with minimal loss and a kind of dead cap. So it's a perfect situation. You have a quarterback, like you said, that's going to be 10 to 16. You can live with that. The Chiefs lived with Alex Smith for a long time, went to a lot of playoff games, didn't reach the Super Bowl, but they were a very successful franchise for a good 5-year stretch. And I don't think you need to, yes, I agree. Short answer, yes, they absolutely need to keep addressing the quarterback position, but not every team needs to send, trade 2 first-round picks to move up and get Mahomes. With that said, though, Jimmy G would be a trade chip if they do happen to find their own kind of Mahomes guy there. I think better examples to look at, look at the Cowboys when they got Dak. 4th-round flyer, why not? Aging quarterback or, different situations, but you can still address the quarterback position without blowing your bankroll on a backup quarterback. I don't see why they wouldn't. Anything
else about the 49ers, or should we move over to the Chiefs? Because this Chiefs window, it's just starting. Yeah. And it's wild to say. And look, they weren't a perfect team at all. I talked about it often on the show, where they had the 32nd or 31st run DVOA this season. And they gave up 100 yards in just over 2 quarters of play in this game. Yet it ultimately doesn't matter, because when you're facing teams that are trying to make up a deficit, they have to abandon the run in critical moments. And that's exactly what they faced this year. You have probably the best right tackle in the NFL in Mitchell Schwartz. I will say that, again, the 49ers pass rush did an incredible job. And one tiny thing that I saw that, I'm not going to say it changed the outcome of this game, but the Chiefs understood that in the second half and allowed for chips and extra man to stay in, and then added Mahomes' just mobility on top of that to give him those extra moments and extra time to throw down the field. They got the job done. I don't see how this team's going to be any worse moving forward, except they're going to have to pay Patrick Mahomes in a couple years, and then it's going to become, okay, well, what about when they don't have these excess weapons all over like
the
a field? Sammy Watkins, who, again, we talked about having a top 5 contract at the wide receiver position, having a great week 1, doing absolutely nothing for 16 or 17 games. You don't have that added benefit of players that you're overpaying for much of the season to then come back and earn that money in critical moments.
With that said, someone like Patrick Mahomes, we've seen Lamar Jackson do this. It's quarterbacks that can create something out of nothing are pretty much the exact guys you want if you're going to have, potentially underqualified set of skill position players. But it'll be interesting. They're probably going to be able to get Tyreek at a discount because of that whole situation. I'm not sure. I think Kelsey is a guy we're going to have to start looking at year to year just because he is, now, I believe, approaching 30, if not over 30 already. And, just what we saw how fast Gronk fell off. And I know Gronk didn't have Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball, but just these aging tight ends, you got to worry about a little bit. But I think the organization, just through the whole Alex Smith thing, they've always been so forward-thinking anyway. I don't think they're going to be satisfied with trying to run back the same roster kind of year after year. Keep improving. And, yeah.
I'm trying to look at their free agents right now. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see if Terrell Suggs retires after this game, and he was a storyline that wasn't even mentioned heading into this game.
That was awesome.
He was the one on that 3rd and 5 throw, was one-on-one against Travis Kelce, I believe, and Jimmy just didn't make the throw to a wide open target and hung on to it for just a little bit too long. LaShawn McCoy's a free agent after being a healthy scratch in this game. It doesn't seem like that. We mentioned how Bashaud Breeland had an awesome game. Chris Jones is about to get paid handsomely. He's a player that I believe this, and it was when John Dorsey was the GM, they had a late first-round pick, and they just traded out of the first round because they thought they could get Chris Jones in this second round, and he is someone that has just emerged as he was one of those effort players that people talked about at Mississippi State that, they wanted him to play with his hair on fire for, every single snap of the game, but he always had these like game breaker moments, and he's really put it all together with this Chiefs team up the middle. And Bashaud Breeland's a free agent. I mean, this is a team that's set up really well. Kendall Fuller, but I believe in Brett Veach. I obviously believe in Andy Reid. And you have, once again, an offense that no leader's insurmountable right now. And you can rarely say that. Like, you can't say that about the Ravens, No. We saw that with the Ravens, who were the best offense in the league this season. Yet when they went down the scoreboard, they didn't know how to react. Yet the Chiefs on the sideline were talking about how they go down by 10 points. They're calling cool. It's nothing different for them. And just string 3 drives together, boom, game over.
Houston was up 24-0 in Arrowhead, and it just didn't even matter. Like, it's just been the story throughout Mahomes' short career. And, man, I mean, he's on pace to be the best quarterback we've ever seen. Like, seriously, it's ridiculous.
The start to his career is mirroring Dan Marino, except he is a Super Bowl ring.
He's an offsides penalty away from being a 2-time Super Bowl champ.
Are there any other moments we need to talk about? The offensive pass interference called on George Kittle, I thought it was the correct call by the letter of the law. I will say that Bill Vinovich and this crew basically didn't throw any flags all game. I mean, there were a couple offsides, false starts, those types of things. I don't think there was a single holding penalty or pass interference that was on the defensive side called all game. But there was that one defense with Travis Kelce getting open in the end zone.
That's right. I just thought the storyline leaving the game that, oh man, Shanahan blew this again. I know he's now responsible for the 2 largest blown leads in the fourth quarter in Super Bowl history. That's tough, obviously, but watch those plays in the fourth quarter. Like, you just want the guy to run the ball, and they've been gaining yards all game. Why can't they keep gaining it? Because they were gaining yards all game, so the Chiefs loaded the box so they could not run the ball. Jimmy G's got to make these throws, whether it's the bomb to Emmanuel Sanders, whether it's the third.
Which is a moment we need to talk about, because it was 24-20. It was a receiver who has a step and a half, who, if it's a great throw, it's a touchdown. If it's a good throw, it's a completion, 1st and goal inside the 10-yard line, and neither happened. And look, we just talked about at the start of this game, at the start of this podcast. Patrick Mahomes didn't have the greatest game he's ever had for 3 quarters, yet in the fourth quarter, he was hitting throws that he had to make. Jimmy had to make that throw, and it didn't happen.
There's another one drive before that, 3rd and 5. Kittle flashes right over the middle. And, it's hard. We don't know the quarterback's reads. We've never had angry men trying to tear our head off as we sit in the pocket, obviously. But, when you see a guy in rhythm and he has that chance and your best player is running across the field wide open, it's hard not to think, what if? So, now I think we kind of covered the key moments. Sure. Oh, I will say also, like, Kendall Fuller should have picked off Jimmy right before the deep miss to Emmanuel Sanders. Like, did Shanahan call the best game of the year? No. And you probably need to be perfect with Jimmy G. But to put the loss squarely on what's been one of the best play callers in the league for the last decade really is just unfair to me.
Be interesting to see if they pay Matt Breida this offseason, the 49ers, because he's a free agent as well.
Tampa. Let's do it.
Let's do that. I mean, Matt Breida, to me, is one of my favorite free agents this offseason. You mentioned Emmanuel Sanders. Jimmy Ward is a free agent. Arik Armstead, who I think had stretches of this season who was better than DeForest Buckner, is a free agent. I mean, this was his contract year explosion. Arik Armstead's a good player, but he was kind of the first of that group that was drafted as a first-round pick, and he just exploded this year. It's difficult to repeat their style. I mean, I don't want to bet against them, obviously, because I think Kyle Shanahan's a top 3, top 5 coach in the NFL. And they're keeping all their coordinators as well, which is massive.
How much stock do you put in the Super Bowl hangover? Because,
I don't know. I mean, I think teams get lucky with injuries. I don't think the 49ers got lucky with injuries this year.
They got healthy at the right time.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of their injuries were earlier in the season. They weathered the storm, especially along the offensive line in those scenarios, and they got healthy once they got to the playoffs. offensive line health, we talked about with the Rams a while ago, offensive line health and continuity and keeping that same unit for like 3 weeks heading into the playoffs and then the entire playoffs is so massive and can never be overstated, in my opinion. And both teams had that this year, yet when Weston Richburg went down at center, I do think that there was a bit of a drop-off at that position because it's pivotal in a Kyle Shanahan system versus Ben Garland, who came in and played admirably well. But and needing a perfect and ideal situation in the pocket and along those running game and what Kyle Shanahan asks of his offensive line, it's difficult. It's difficult on anyone.
You know, I don't want to count out the 49ers for next year already or anything like that, but this NFC West, is probably going to be the best division in the NFC this year. And look, the 49ers, as great as they were all season, were, about an inch away from losing the division to the Seahawks in, like, Week 17. Year 2, Kyler and Cliff are probably going to take a step forward. I'd be shocked if McVay and the Rams are that bad on offense again next year. Again, we all know what Russ does every single year. So it's going to be tough for them to really make it out of there again because I think the NFC is pretty clearly the better overall conference. I mean, I don't know if anyone's going to be really competing with Mahomes other than Lamar Jackson.
Right. And you talked about the NFC West. It's loaded with Russell Wilson, with Kyler Murray, I guess with Jared Goff, and Jimmy Garoppolo. Yet you look at the AFC.
Careful. I like Drew Lock now.
Okay. You look at the AFC, and you have Patrick Mahomes, as you mentioned, and then you have Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
And I mean, Patrick Mahomes is 24 years old. Lamar Jackson, just turned 22 years of age.
Unbelievable. Being
able to see those teams in two very different styles battle it out for a very, very long time. Cannot wait to see. And obviously, you have Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry as well, hopefully.
I think that's and we were talking earlier, can the 49ers continue to address the quarterback position? Look at what Tennessee did. I mean, just taking a guy, Tannehill, first round pedigree, you know he has the talent, hasn't worked out. That didn't cost him anything, and it got him to the AFC Championship. So just address the quarterback position, whether it's a late round draft pick, whether it's a veteran backup, just always address that. Because when you can find one of these game changers, there's no greater win.
I am a little nervous that you and I are just getting into groupthink here with that. It's something, though, that we did bring up all season long because you saw moments of it. It didn't really hurt them in a win and loss standpoint. But, we try to watch every single game, every single week. And just across the league, you see the quarterbacks that can carry their team at those times. And I just never felt like that with San Francisco.
And the thing is, you look at, I think of yards after the catch as both a indicator of play calling because you're scheming these guys in open areas and just kind of skill position talent. We've seen Kittle and Deebo Samuel do that. Really, a lot was going right for that offense all year, and Jimmy just had to orchestrate it. And the orchestration was not that hard compared to what we've seen a lot of other quarterbacks do. So I think that was more the troubling thing. And, part of it also wasn't his fault. But when the guy throws 7 passes in a NFC Championship win, it's just hard to give him that much credit.
I think that's going to do it. I think we did a good job.
Yeah, not bad.
I think we did a good job. Thank you so much, everyone, for sticking with us all year long. That's our last game preview of the year. Ian, actually. It's XFL season, Ian.
XFL
tell
season.
The people?
I will have my mega preview I've been putting my blood, sweat, and tears into for the last 2 weeks out tomorrow morning. So check it out. We got 10 more weeks of football coming up. The games will be good. We got it on DraftKings. There's some season-long options. Don't count out the XFL. Just try it. That's all I ask. Just try it.
Complete savage. Later on this week, we have a couple leftover interviews from Super Bowl week. Justin Forsett. Jordy Nelson, the underground king of the wide receiver position.
Nice.
We have Gary Vaynerchuk as well. So I'm going to be putting those out this week for our second episode of the series. That's going to do it for us. For John Daigle, for Ian Hartitz, I'm Josh Norris. Thanks so much, everyone. Talk to y'all soon.